DJ Brown picked off 3 passes last year from the corner position. As we take it to safety as well, is Brandon Joseph going to just simply be Kyle Hamilton? Now, we don't know if he's going to replace him in regards to productivity and just the remarkable playmaking ability, but in terms of position, is that just a 1-for-1?
I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the case because they may move him into the field spot. I think that's kind of be determined. And ideally, they want to get in a situation where the safeties are sort of interchangeable. Kyle a lot last year was sort of that boundary guy and had to do some things maybe to protect other parts of the defense. But when he went out, he was replaced by Ramon Henderson and Xavier Watts. So I don't know if Brandon's going to slide into the same spot, but he's being asked to step into sort of that playmaking role. And his playmaking is different than Kyle's. They're different athletes, different players. Kyle's a far more dynamic player. Brandon has to get back to being that guy he was in 2020, where he's not an elite athlete. He just was always around the ball in 2020. And he kind of got away from that last year because the rest of the defense around him wasn't that good. I mean, they lost their linebackers. They lost Greg Newsom. They lost a lot of what made that 2020 defense so good. And I think Brandon kind of put a lot more on himself, say, I got to go make these plays. And he would miss tackles that he didn't miss the year before. He was overplaying things, like trying to guess more maybe than he was. I would say is the best way for me to put it than he was the year before. And he wasn't as an effective player. You transferred to Notre Dame, and now it's like, hey, man, you're back to where you were in 2020. Right, you're surrounded by other really good football players. You don't have to do anybody else's job. You got to do your job, and I think that's going to help him get back to be the player. And the biggest thing is you got to tell him, look, Brandon, we're not asking you to be Kyle Hamilton, right? Kyle Hamilton is Kyle Hamilton. We're asking you to be the best version of Brandon Joseph, and if he can be that, I think it really solidifies a position group because you got to remember, Mark, they played half the year last year without Kyle Hamilton. And he got hurt in the first quarter of the USC game and never came back. So we've seen this defense without Kyle. We've seen the good of parts of what this defense can be without Kyle. Not good, better than what he was, but they're still pretty good. And then we saw like the Oklahoma State game, you're like, boy, they could have really used 14 back there as DJ Brown and some of those guys were missing tackles and getting beat up the seams and things like that. But you could have really used 14 in that game, right? Well, now you've got, Brandon Joseph back there and you say, hey, hopefully he can kind of fill that void to where when you're in a game against an Oklahoma State or Ohio State and you need a safety to make a play, like we saw Brandon Joseph do against Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game with a crucial interception in the end zone to help keep that game competitive. Well, Notre Dame's going to have a much better offense than what Northwestern put on the field that day, right? And so if your defense can make enough stops, then that's where you say, okay, now you have an opportunity to be competitive in that game where you go into the fourth quarter with a chance to win. Those are going to be the keys. And so he's important to that because if he can solidify a spot, then you can kind of figure out, okay, who's our next safety? Who's going to play beside him? What's the rotation going to look like? Are we going to be interchangeable with our guys, or are we going to have to play field boundary? I think it's the other players that are going to largely determine how you use Brandon Joseph. You're going to have to use him as sort of either to protect those other safeties, or if they step up and emerge, and again, the potential turns into production, which is, again, a very key theme with Notre Dame. I understand that. Then you can say, hey, you know what, let's use Brandon all around because we feel comfortable with between the combination of Ramon Henderson and Xavier Watts and DJ Brown and Houston Griffith. When he's in the game with so-and-so, we can put him in the field. When he's in the game with such and such, we can put him over here. When this guy's in the game, we can use him this way. And then that way you can use Brandon in his entire package, but you may have to complement him with, depending on if you want to use him this way, you may have to put another guy here at safety. If you want to use him this way, you may have to put the other guy at safety. I think that's where you can kind of get into some problems because if that's the case, eventually – your opponents are going to start to see that when they get their game prep. Like, hey, when this guy's in the game, this is how they use Brandon. And when this guy's in the game, this is how they use Brandon. You want to have guys that can come in there and do a little bit of everything to where Notre Dame can get to be that interchangeable, safety position where it's not just field, not just boundary. One guy's playing over top, one guy's playing the alleys, that kind of thing. And that's, to me, the biggest question mark about this group. And if that pans out, I think it's going to take a lot of pressure off Brandon Joseph, and we're going to see him look a lot more like the 2020 version of himself than what he was in 2021.